Well, I think the media, and especially when I started, it was basically just the newspaper and radio. We had to be, we had to try to, coaching a kind of what they used to call a minor sport, or a sport that didn't generate a lot of interest, like running did in the early days. We used to have to work at calling in our results, and because nobody's going to call us about how did you do, and so it was always kind of an extra duty that I had to do to make sure that the and back when Malone first started, we didn't have a sports information director, so it was up to me as coach to call the radio and call the newspaper and try to cultivate relationships with reporters so that they would carry our results. I guess one thing I remember way back, the local newspaper, the Canton Repository sports editor, we would do really well. We'd beat Ohio State, and we would beat Mid-America, Kent, and Akron, and they didn't put it in the paper. And so I would go to the editor, who was a big, his main sport was wrestling, and of course being in Canton, football, he covered that. And I said, why don't you ever write anything about Malone cross country? And he would say, we try to gauge the spectator interest by the size. Like when we go to an event, if it's inside like a volleyball game, if a lot of people show up, then we're going to give it more publicity. If not very many people show up, then we're not going to write about it. I said, well, my cross country invitational last weekend drew 8,000 people, counting all the parents and spectators and participants, because we had 3,000 runners there. And so if that's your gauge, why don't, so I'm arguing why they should cover our sport better.
Yeah.
Well, I think our athletes always like recognition. And so part of my coaching responsibilities was to try to get the media to cover them, and especially when they got honors. And I think at times throughout my career, we created titles for the athletes so that they get recognized, and so that the paper might recognize them. Runner of the Week, or Stark County Athlete of the Week, and things like that.
Yeah.
Well, media has changed in my 50-plus years at Malone. Media has changed drastically. And so I currently find that the local newspaper, I think that they have great leadership now, and I think they do a fantastic job of covering Stark County events and news, and especially sports. And so I think it comes from leadership. They have some really, the editor and the publisher really gets it, I think, and I think that they're trying to survive. In this day of electronic media, the printed page, how long is that going to last, actually? And so they're really doing a good job. As far as what I could change, I don't really know. I'm not a techie guy, so just learning how to tweet and stuff like that was great for me, and I'm just trying to keep up. And so for me to figure out a way to change it, I don't think I would have any suggestions.